Hey everybody, I'm Yvonne Williams with Back to Earth Creations, and in this video I want to show y'all how to make your very own Twilight Princess bracers from the Zelda franchise games. There's a little bit of modification to here so I can avoid outright copyright infringement, but these are for cosplay purposes, so I did try to make them as close to the original as possible, but I did add in the nice little Triforce insignias there. I just liked the way it looked. But this tutorial goes along hand in hand with the template that I sell on my Etsy, which will be down in the video description, like a little link to it to where you can find it. Also, if you're one of my $10 or up patrons, don't buy the template. It's in the digital download file for you to just download and print off on your own, along with all of the other templates that I have in my Etsy and like so much more. So let's go ahead and get started. Here I have stained using a green EcoFlow water-based stain on the under part of the bracer, and I've dampened our about 7-ounce vegetable tanned leather. You want it damp enough that it will still absorb a little bit more moisture, but it's not like soggy. And just going through with a piece of parchment paper, actually, or freezer paper with the waxy side down, I'm going through and using a ballpoint tool to transfer our design. You could draw up your own design, or if you printed this one off of my digital download template, you can use it with computer paper, but it will have a tendency to stick to the damp leather. So I really recommend printing it off and then tracing it onto a piece of freezer paper or tracing film. And now you can see it left a very light imprint, and then I'm going to go through with this tool called a wing divider and make the border specific to the piece of leather, because sometimes I can get a little inconsistent about how I'm cutting out my leather. Then I'm using a broad-bladed swivel knife. You could use whichever blade you prefer. I don't recommend like a filigree blade or anything like that, but I like stuff that makes a nice wide cut. And I'm just going through, slicing around over on the trace lines. Don't worry about it if your trace job isn't perfect, because you can clean that up with your cuts. And again, while I do try to get the best quality that I can with my cuts, if I mess up on them, there's ways that you can fix that when you go in and do your beveling. So there's always a way to polish it up in the next step. That and practice, practice, practice. Just slicing around, following the design lines. And these same techniques that I'm using for this piece could be used on any design, or with, like say we were doing like the flap of a purse as opposed to a bracer. So even though I'm making armor, don't think that what I'm doing is armor specific. So we've gone through, and I try really hard to not have them overlap each other, the cut lines. And now you can see the leather started to dry a bit, so I just spritz a little bit more on there. This has been fully cased, but at the time of, shooting it, it had been like 3 hours earlier on a pretty dry day. So I'm going through with this backgrounding tool and just filling in, staying, kind of in between the lines. Here's a different angle for you guys, but I'm just moving the tool and hit and move and hit and move kind of stuff. So again, trying to color in the lines. Well, not color in the lines, but I think you know what I mean. I don't want to overlap onto the parts of the design that aren't going to have the shaded background. And this backgrounding, while giving it a very nice texture, will also, whenever we go on with the antique gel, give the antique gel something to settle into, so it'll give us some really nice color contrasts. And now I'm going to be going through with a textured beveler foot, lining the deep edge up with the cut line that we had made. And what this accomplishes is it, for lack of a better term, carves the leather into more of a three-dimensional feel. And it also gives a really nice beveled texture down in there. I do have another tutorial if you're watching this, I'm not sure if it's released yet. I mean, it should be, like they shouldn't be releasing only a few days apart, but take an eye out on my leatherworking playlist, because I do have a tutorial following along with this same design. but where I don't texture in the background and I use a repel gel, or like a repel technique. So there you can see how it looks like before and after beveling. I think the beveling gives it a really nice touch. And that's before and after any kind of texturing or anything. So you could just leave it just plain straight lines too, if you know if that's all you want to do. It's your piece, do it. Now I'm just using these are nitrile gloves, and I'm using a dark brown EcoFlow antique gel, getting it all over. I'm very generous with this stuff because you're going to get better results being generous than with stingy. I put a glob on the back and then spritz it with some water to help thin it out a little bit, just because I feel like I don't need it to be as intense on the back as on the front. And then with a spritzed pad of paper towel, I'm going through and just buffing off the extra. And you can see that really settled down into the crevices nicely. Cleaning up the edges. And then I'm going to let this dry completely, then meet you guys back here for the next step. Our antique gel has completely dried, and now the next step is going to be to add some of our Fibings Aussie leather conditioner, and I had actually gone ahead and added some of my own lavender essential oil to this just because I really like the way it smells. I'm using just a horsehair shoe polish brush and stipling across the surface and then buffing it in. You could also use a terry cloth sponge or a piece of denim. I mean, there's so many different options. Just do however you prefer. I really like on things with a lot of tooling to be able to go through and use the horsehair brush because it keeps anything from settling into all of the grooves. And also, I just realized that I had not gone through and tooled around this piece here. So I'm gonna have to go through and do that. Fortunately, I do have another piece right here. I was working on a big batch of these, so even though it has been stained and everything, I still can go through, re-wet it. Having put the leather conditioner on is going to make it a little complicated, but I'll revisit this piece in another tutorial. So just buffing in our surface. And you can see it actually really warms up the color of the stain too, as well as burnishing the surface. And it's just, I don't know, it's a really nice step, I feel. Takes a good bit of elbow grease, but that's alright. But I really feel like it gives the leather a nice warm glow. And we can do the same thing to the back side. And using a leather conditioner can also really help to make sure that your leather doesn't crack and become susceptible to dry rot over time. Again, just buffing and rubbing it into the surface. Then we can also, here I have a brick of beeswax, just plain beeswax, and I'm rubbing it over the edges. There are all sorts of different products that you can use. Some people just use water to slick their edges. I like beeswax. I like the way it feels. I like the way it smells. I like the way it wears over time. And where is my edge slicker? Okay, there it is. And then we're going to go through with a tool called an edge slicker and just start using the variety of different sizes that are there, buffing it into the edge of the leather. And you can see that gives it a really nice effect, I think. So that's a burnished edge compared to a non-burnished edge. So you can see it helps close the pores. It's just kind of shaping everything down nicely between the two. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to make sure to slick and burnish all of my edges. Now, if you're using a leather that's too thin to really, or too like kind of malleable to use the edge slicker on, you can also go through with just some denim and burnish the surface that way. And you can actually feel, I mean, just the friction that that produces helps melt the beeswax into the leather really nicely. So we have gone through, we have finished burnishing up all of our leather pieces. And now it's time to start assembling. So I'm going to be going through with a 1/4 inch hole punch. And you could use a wing divider and a ruler to make everything nice and equidistant. There should be holes, like dots for holes marked on your template, but just do however you like. I'm going to come in, line it up, and punch. And then I go to the other end, line it up and punch. And then I'm going to do 5 holes. So doing one equidistant between the 2 ends. There we are. And then another hole in between those 2. There we are. I'm going to turn it around, do the same thing to the other side. You want to make sure that you get a clean connection all the way through. And so from there, we would set our eyelets, which I rummaged through and promptly lost my eyelets. Yep. Here they are. Oh, I could use some pointers in craft room organization. And if anybody says just clean up after yourself, I'm gonna cry because that's really hard. Okay, so we have the base and we have our eyelet. Now, this is an eyelet as opposed to a grommet, so there's only one part. We're gonna put it face down and then flip our leather piece over. Slide it over the stem of the eyelet and then use our hitter, which I don't think is the official name for it, but okay. And then I'm just going to take my rawhide mallet and hammer it down. On thinner leather you will get splitting. I have yet to find a way to avoid that. I just try to make sure that it's non-obtrusive, like it's not going to be poking into the skin. But that's how it looks on the surface. And so we're going to go through and we're going to do that to each of our punched holes, because we would then go through and lace this up the way we would a boot, or you know, whatever your preferred lacing method. There we go. And I'm going to finish up doing this on both bracers, and then I'll meet you guys back here. We have all of our eyelets set, so now I want to mount this piece onto the bracer. And honestly, this by itself is a bracer, so if you purchase the template for this design, you're actually getting 2 different designs out of it, so that's really fun. And we're just going to line it up, and then I am using a 1/8 inch punch, which may actually be a little thin for this. Yep. 1/8 inch punch, and I am going to set a rivet here and here, as well as here and here. And you can make modifications for yourself, determining where you would like determining where you would like your holes to be, so you do not have to put them where I have them drawn in on the template. Now also, I made a slight mistake here, and hopefully it won't come back to bite me in the bum. We're supposed to be hammering these separately because as this curves, the outer bracer will actually, like, the holes won't really line up anymore. It'll cause possibly some slight puckering on a very petite arm. So what we would do is we would come in, and I'm going to mark where I would like them to be. Then hammer here. Hammer there. And now we would come through and place this on the surface and mark with our awl where we would like the holes to be. And then I'm actually going to hammer just slightly on the inside of where that hole is marked. So you can see that's where the hole is, or the mark is. So I'm going to hammer right there off to the side of it. And what that's going to accomplish is give us a very slight bit of difference for whenever the bracer is curved. So move that off to the side. And again, here I am using small rivets, but you could use any, small rivets in copper rather, but you can use whatever color scheme you prefer. I like the copper because I feel like it blends in with the brown nicely, but a nice brass rivet would have looked good too. And I'm just pushing it through the back side. On all 4 holes. Placing it down on the surface, and then lining our piece up with it. I'm going to line up on one side first, place the caps, there we are, set it using the domed side of our rivet setter, and now I'm going to feed through on the other side. And it can take a little finagling to get it to line up, but that's okay. And you can see how it has a little bit of a pucker. That's good, that's what we want. Lining that up. Okay. And so now from here, we can take it and see it kind of puckered a little bit. It's my mistake. But you can kind of force it in and it'll be okay. As it dries, we can actually take it and just roll it, stretch and compress the leather a little bit, get it shaped around so that it'll sit very comfortably as a bracer on your forearm. And then we would just do that same thing to the other one. Hey y'all, thanks so much for hanging out with me during this video. I really hope that it was helpful to you. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, please leave them down below, as well as any requests that you might have for future tutorials. There should be links to all the different tools and materials used down in the video description also, but probably already said that at some point in the tutorial. Also, If you enjoy my free tutorials and would like to support the creation of more of them, there are links to my Patreon down below where, like I had mentioned earlier, we have the digital download content. I do monthly shipments of craft crates, just depending on what you pledge and what tier you're in and different things. We also do all sorts of behind the scenes pictures and updates, like almost daily is my goal, but doesn't always happen. Also, if you follow along with any of my videos and would like to share your work or just want to share your work in general, you can tag me on Instagram or post it to my Facebook wall or post it to the community page on Patreon as well. And that's to do that, you don't have to be a pledger or anything. So I do have a lot of stuff going on for everybody over on my Patreon page. But thank you guys so much again for spending your time with me, and until my next video, happy crafting. Bye.